Every summer has its own magic. The sound of waves, the smell of salt in the air, and the warmth of sunlight that feels like home. But this summer, it's different. This is the summer where love is tested, memories come alive, and the past whispers through the wind. This is the story behind the perfect family, the story of Mr. and Mrs. Fisher. Before the heartbreaks, before the love triangles, before everything changed, there was them, the heart of Cousins Beach. The ones who taught everyone what love truly means. And what it costs. The mornings at Cousins Beach were always soft and golden. The ocean stretched out like an endless dream, and the sand carried the laughter of old summers. The Fisher house stood proud by the shore, its white walls glowing under the sun, its doors always open for friends, family, and memories. It wasn't just a house, it was a world of its own, built with love, care, and the kind of joy that only existed here. During these fleeting months of warmth, Mr. Fisher would wake up early every day, long before anyone else, and walk to the beach with a cup of coffee in hand. He loved the calm before the day began, the quiet that wrapped around him like an old friend. He wasn't the loud type, he was steady, patient, always watching, always thinking. He carried the kind of love that didn't need words. You could feel it in the way he smiled at his wife, in the way he fixed things around the house without being asked, in the way he noticed every small detail, the flowers his wife loved, the music that played softly through the house, the moments that mattered most. Mrs. Fisher, on the other hand, was the light of the summer. She was full of energy, laughter, and color. Her presence made everything brighter, the kind of person who could turn an ordinary day into something unforgettable. Everyone loved her, not because she tried to be perfect, but because she was real. Her kindness reached everyone. Her voice carried through the hallways like a melody. She loved her family deeply, fiercely. Her love was the heartbeat of Cousins Beach, the reason why every summer felt like home. Together, they made the house come alive. There were dinners that stretched into midnight talks, small beach bonfires that turned into memories, and days filled with laughter that echoed through the open windows. For the children, Conrad, Jeremiah, and Belly, life here was golden. It was sunshine and sandcastles, secrets whispered at night, and moments that felt like they'd last forever. But no one knew then how much these moments would mean later. No one knew that behind the perfect sunsets and the easy laughter, time was quietly ticking away, taking with it something precious. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Mrs. Fisher would stand by the porch, her hands wrapped around a glass of lemonade, watching her family play by the water. She'd smile that soft, knowing smile and say, "This is what life is about." Mr. Fisher would join her, his arm around her shoulder, both of them quiet, both of them knowing that these were the days they'd never get back. But even in perfect summers, shadows always find a way in. Beneath the laughter, there were unspoken things, fears, regrets, dreams that never found their way into words. There were looks that lingered too long, and silences that said too much. The love between Mr. and Mrs. Fisher was strong. But even the strongest hearts can tremble when change begins to whisper through the wind. And yet, for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. The waves kissed the shore, the world was bathed in light, and love filled every corner of that beach house. It was the beginning of a summer that would never be forgotten. The summer where everything beautiful began. And where everything would change. The days at Cousins Beach carried on like a dream that refused to end. The sound of the ocean was still the same. The laughter still floated through the air, and the sunlight still danced across the waves. But something had changed. Not enough for the children to see it, but enough for the heart to feel it. There was a stillness in the mornings now, a kind of silence that used to be filled with music. It was as if the house itself could sense the shift, the whispers between the walls. The distance that had quietly grown between Mr. and Mrs. Fisher. It started small, the way most endings do. A missed glance here, a forgotten word there. Mr. Fisher stayed longer at his study, pretending to read the same page over and over while his mind wandered somewhere far away. Mrs. Fisher would hum softly to herself while setting the table, her voice trembling slightly on the notes she used to sing with joy. Their lives still moved in sync, but their hearts, they were beginning to drift. It wasn't anger or bitterness, it was something gentler, something sadder, the kind of fading love that doesn't explode, but instead slips away quietly, like the tide leaving the shore. Every evening, they still sat together on the porch, just like always, but now, their conversations were shorter, the pauses longer. Sometimes, they'd talk about the children, about the weather, about plans for next summer, even though they both knew next summer might not be the same. He would smile at her stories, and she would laugh at his jokes. But underneath that laughter, there was a weight neither could carry aloud. There were words they didn't say, and fears they didn't share. Because sometimes, silence is easier than the truth. Mrs. Fisher could feel her body growing tired. Even though she tried to hide it behind bright dresses and wide smiles, she'd always been the strong one, the one who made everything beautiful, no matter how hard life became. But now, there were moments when the sunlight felt too heavy. When the laughter of her children echoed like a reminder of all the summers she might miss. She would brush it off, pretending nothing was wrong, pretending the world was still as golden as before. Because for her, love wasn't about showing pain, it was about protecting others from it. Mr. Fisher saw it all, though he never said it out loud. He saw the way her hands trembled when she poured her tea, the way her smile lingered a second too long, as if holding on to the light itself. He wanted to tell her he was scared too, that the thought of losing her was something he couldn't bear, but he didn't. Instead, he just loved her harder in the quiet ways he knew, fixing the porch lights, bringing her flowers from the garden, staying up late just to watch her sleep peacefully for a few hours. He wasn't a man of words. He was a man of promises, and his biggest one was that he'd stand beside her. No matter what. The children, caught in their own young worlds, didn't see the truth right away. To them, their parents were unshakable pillars of love that could never fall. But love, even the strongest kind, can crack under the weight of unspoken goodbyes. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't losing someone, it's pretending you're not going to. As the days passed, the house began to feel heavier, like the air was thick with everything unsaid. Mrs. Fisher's laughter came less often now, though when it did, it filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Mr. Fisher tried to hold on to those moments, to freeze them in time. Every shared glance, every quiet evening, every sunset felt sacred. The way she rested her head on his shoulder, the way his hand found hers without a word. The love between them was changing, not fading, but deepening into something quieter, more fragile, yet more powerful than before. And in that fragility there was beauty, because even as the light began to dim, their hearts still beat for each other, steady, faithful, and full of everything they could never say. This was not the kind of love that burned bright and faded away. This was the kind of love that stayed even when the world began to turn cold. The kind that would outlast every summer, every storm, every goodbye. By the time the season began to change, the sunsets seemed softer, the ocean a little slower, the nights a little longer, and in those final golden days, as the world held its breath, the Fishers' love stood tall, not perfect, not unbreakable, but real. The kind of love that could only be born from summers like these. The summer sun still rose over Cousins Beach, but it didn't feel the same anymore. The light that once danced through the Fisher house now fell quieter, softer, as if the world itself knew something was shifting. The laughter that once filled the air had turned into gentle conversations, the kind that come with pauses heavy enough to hold 1,000 unspoken fears. It wasn't that love had disappeared. No, love was still there, stronger than ever, but it had changed its shape. It had turned into something tender, something aching, something that existed between heartbeats rather than in words. Mrs. Fisher woke each morning with a practiced smile. She still brushed her hair in front of the mirror, still chose her favorite summer dress, still hummed the same songs that once floated through the halls. But now, when she looked at her reflection, she could see it, the quiet truth in her eyes. She was getting weaker. The long walks on the beach that used to bring her peace now left her breathless. The sound of the waves, once so full of promise, now felt like a countdown. And yet, she refused to let the world see her fading. This was her summer, her family's summer, and she was determined to make it shine, even if it meant burning herself down to keep it warm. Mr. Fisher had always been a man of calm strength, but lately, he felt the weight of helplessness pressing on his chest. He'd watch her from the porch, pretending to read the newspaper while his eyes followed her every move, every laugh she gave, every small smile, every breeze that touched her hair. He memorized it all. He didn't know how to say goodbye, not when she was still right there beside him. So instead, he held on tighter to the small things, her favorite tea in the morning, her hand resting on his arm during dinner, the sound of her voice saying his name softly in the dark. But love isn't just light, it's also the shadow it leaves behind. And one afternoon, when the sky turned gray over the beach, Mrs. Fisher collapsed while walking to the garden. The house that had always felt alive suddenly went still. The boys ran for their father, their voices shaking with fear, and for the first time, Mr. Fisher couldn't find the words to calm them. He lifted her in his arms, his heart pounding, whispering her name over and over, as if saying it could keep her from slipping away. That evening, the whole family sat together, waiting for a storm to pass, waiting for the truth they didn't want to face. The walls of the Fisher house, once filled with laughter and music, now carried the sound of quiet prayers. Mrs. Fisher woke later that night, her face pale but her eyes gentle. "Don't cry," she whispered to her husband. "It's just a bad day." But he knew. He had always known. He took her hand and held it, as if letting go meant losing her completely. The next few weeks became a blur of sunsets and silence. The children tried to pretend everything was normal. Conrad grew quiet. Jeremiah kept smiling, even when his eyes were red. They didn't understand how to carry sadness that big. Mrs. Fisher, ever the heart of the home, refused to let sorrow win. She planned small beach picnics, told stories late into the night, and laughed like the world wasn't slipping through her fingers. And every time she smiled, Mr. Fisher felt both proud and broken. Proud that she could still bring warmth into their world. Broken because he knew it couldn't last forever. One evening, as the sun began to fall, the whole family sat on the beach together. The sky was painted in gold and rose. The air smelled like salt and summer, and for a moment, it felt like everything was exactly how it used to be. Mrs. Fisher rested her head on her husband's shoulder, her eyes half closed. "Promise me," she whispered, "no matter what happens, you'll keep the summers going." He looked at her, his voice caught in his throat. "I promise," he said. And it wasn't just a promise, it was a vow carved into his soul. That night, the ocean sounded louder, the stars brighter, the air stiller. It was as if the universe had stopped to watch the Fisher family hold on to what remained of their summer. In the quiet that followed, the truth settled in like the tide. Soft, steady, unstoppable. The summer they once thought would last forever was slipping away, one wave at a time. But love, real love, doesn't disappear with the season. It lingers in the laughter that still echoes through the house, in the scent of salt that stays on the wind, and in the hearts of those left behind by the time the first leaves began to fall. Cousins Beach was different. The Fisher house stood the same, but it carried memories instead of voices. And though the laughter had faded, love remained not loud or bright, but quiet and eternal. Because this was the summer, everything changed. The summer, when love became more than a feeling, it became a memory that would live on, even when the sun no longer rose the same way. The following summer arrived softer, quieter, and slower than before. Cousins Beach was still the same, the waves still reached for the shore, the sky still blushed at dusk, and the breeze still carried the scent of salt and wildflowers, but something deep within it had changed. The laughter that once spilled freely from the Fisher house had turned into echoes. The walls still stood strong, but they whispered memories instead of moments. Every room, every chair, every grain of sand outside held a piece of the past, a trace of love that refused to fade. Mrs. Fisher was gone, but she wasn't truly gone. Her spirit lingered in every sunset, in every smile that dared to return, in the warmth that still wrapped around the home when the light hit just right. She had been the heart of Cousins Beach, the soul that made the summers come alive. And even in her absence, that magic stayed. Mr. Fisher made sure of it. He kept her favorite flowers on the porch, her records in the living room, and her laughter. Oh, her laughter still played in his head every morning when he brewed his coffee. He didn't move on. He moved with her through the quiet days and lonely nights. Grief had a way of reshaping him, carving gentleness into his silence, teaching him to love in smaller, softer ways. He spoke less, smiled less, but when he did, it meant more. The neighbors noticed how he still tended to the garden she loved, how he still left a chair open at dinner, how he still looked out at the ocean as if waiting for her reflection in the waves. People pitied him, but they didn't understand. He wasn't waiting for her to return. He was learning how to live in the world she left behind, how to keep her alive through the love she gave. Conrad and Jeremiah grew up fast that year. Their mother's absence shaped them in different ways. Conrad became quieter, his eyes heavy with thought, always trying to hold everything together. He carried his father's calmness, his mother's depth. Jeremiah, on the other hand, refused to let the light die. He was sunshine through sorrow, laughter through tears, always trying to keep the house bright for everyone else. They didn't talk about her much. They didn't need to. Every look, every action, every step they took was a reminder of her presence. She was in them, in their kindness, their courage, their stubborn belief that love, no matter how painful, was worth it. One evening, as the summer sun began to fade, Mr. Fisher sat on the porch alone, the same spot where he and his wife used to watch the children run down to the beach. He held her favorite book in his hands, its pages worn, its corners soft from years of being read aloud. He opened it, reading lines he'd heard her say 1,000 times. And for the first time in months, he smiled a full, real smile. It wasn't joy exactly. It was peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally understand that love doesn't end. It just changes shape. Later that night, the boys joined him. The three of them sat together, watching the moon rise over the water. There were no words, just the sound of waves brushing against the shore. And in that silence, something beautiful happened. They all felt her there. Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a warmth, a feeling that wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Mrs. Fisher had kept her promise. Her love hadn't left them. It had only transformed. The next morning, the house came alive again. Conrad made breakfast. Jeremiah played the old records. Mr. Fisher opened all the windows and let the sea breeze flow through, carrying laughter, music, and memories. For the first time in a long while, it felt like summer again, not the same summer they once had, but a new one, touched by loss yet filled with gratitude. They realized then that grief wasn't about holding on or letting go. It was about learning how to live with love that no longer has a body but still has a soul. Years later, when the boys grew older and came back to Cousins Beach with families of their own, the house still stood strong. The porch still faced the sea, the flowers still bloomed where she once planted them, and the sunsets still painted the sky the same shade she loved most. Mr. Fisher, older now, would sit with his grandchildren and tell them stories about their grandmother, how she laughed too loud, loved too deeply, and lived as if every day was her last summer. And when they asked if he missed her, he would smile and say, "Every day, but she's still here." In all of this, as the years passed, the legend of Mr. and Mrs. Fisher became more than just a love story. It became a symbol of what it means to love truly, to lose gracefully, and to keep living bravely. Their story became the heartbeat of Cousins Beach, the reason every new summer felt like an echo of the one that changed everything. Because love, like theirs, doesn't fade with time. It becomes the tide that keeps returning, the wind that whispers through the trees, the memory that stays even when everything else does not. And every summer, when the light hits the Fisher house just right, it almost feels like she's there again, smiling, barefoot on the porch, her laughter blending with the sound of the sea. This was the legacy of the Fishers, a story not about endings, but about forever. The summer that began with love, endured through loss, and lived on through memory. A love that turned pain into poetry, and farewell into forever. Because some summers don't end, they simply live on in the hearts they touched.